Chapter 3. This room was too big, the ceiling was too high, the doors too tall, and the white carpet that went from wall to wall looked like a fresh fall of snow at Lake Arrowhead. There were full-length mirrors and crystal doodads all over the place. The ivory furniture had chromium on it, and the enormous ivory drapes lay tumbled on the white carpet a yard from the windows. The white made the ivory look dirty, and the ivory made the white look bled out. The windows started towards the darkening foothills. It was going to rain soon. There was pressure in the air already. I sat down on the edge of the deep, soft chair and looked at Mrs. Reagan. She was worth a stare. She was trouble. She was stretched out on a modernistic chaise lounge with her slippers off, so I stared at her legs and the sheerest silk stockings. They seemed to be arranged to stare out. They were visible to the knee, and one of them well beyond. The knees were dimpled, not bony and sharp. The calves were beautiful, the ankles long and slim, and with enough melodic line for a tone poem. Welcome to another Behind the Poem story. And this is obviously one of my favorite poems in the collection, Noir Women. Noir came out of my absolute love for Raymond Chandler's writing. There's something about the tone of description that he does, the tone of his writing when he describes something gritty, and whether it's the damsel in distress, the horrible square-jawed bad guy, the mobster with too much money and not enough sense, the dirt of the gutter that he's sitting in there in the stakeout. Something about the way he even describes the femme fatale absolutely makes me smile and be breathless. Noir as a genre really intrigues me. It's something that I shouldn't like because of how dated all the attitudes are and the gender roles of masculinity and femininity. But at the same time, some of the female roles in these PI books, the Philip Marlowe's and the Sam Spades and Mickey Spillane and Chandler's novels, are just irresistible. There's something about the grit and lawlessness of the vigilante, the private detective willing to shade the law, not necessarily break the law, but shade the law to protect his clients. Those kinds of things really kind of intrigue me. And of course, the classic films that were made from the noir novels, which always kind of intrigue me in how they present those same square-jawed femme fatale characters. The bit I just read to you from chapter 3 of The Big Sleep is one of my favorites. It's one of the first ones of Raymond Chandler's that I ever read, and I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I loved the twists and the turns and the not quite figuring out what was going on until the very last page. And so you'll note that on the back of the book of Coffee and Paper Cuts is a quote from Chandler, which he wrote about writing. So another thing that intrigues me about Chandler's writing is that he did comment on his writing process. He did comment on how to write or why to write, or even the quality of his own writing, which I find reflective and introspective and interesting, because we all have that sense that our work is either too good or not good enough, or nobody's going to like it, and we resist putting it out there. And the concept, the quote that I chose for the back of the book that he has about writing, throw up on your typewriter every morning and clean up every noon, is kind of what happens in the writing process of most poets, me included. I always sketch down my idea, and then later on I go and I write the poem in hand. On paper with pen and scratch stuff out and switch stuff around and cross out lines and restart and rewrite and all of that by hand before I type it onto my computer, where I do the first edit myself, and then I edit it at least one more time, possibly 3, 4, even 5 times, until I submit it to a collection, until it's kind of locked into where I want it to be. So this concept of just getting the idea out and pinning it to the page for later reflection really appeals to me. one of the things about noir that it seems counterintuitive is that the women are all damsels in distress, you know, desperately seeking the square-jawed, wide-shouldered PI to help them out of danger. But a lot of them turn out to be the villain, and a lot of them turn out to be more empowered than they seem to be at first. They are either, you know, they're wealthy, or even the ones that aren't wealthy are more savvy or streetwise or tricky, or, you know, twisting the power away from the men in their lives than they might otherwise appear in a two-dimensional way. I find that really fantastic. I find that really fascinating, given it was the 30s. And so when I was writing kind of a love letter to the genre of noir, I couldn't do anything other than have a noir woman be the center of my noir poem. And I also couldn't do anything other than have Raymond Chandler's quote about Mrs. Reagan at the top of such a noir poem, that she was worth a stare, she was trouble. And she really, really was. If you read The Big Sleep, you will find out just how much trouble Mrs. Reagan was, as well as her sister, as well as at least two other women in the book, and all the men that they are involved with, past and present. So I do recommend the genre if you like interesting descriptions. And so my poem Noir was born out of a love of the noir genre, and equally an admission to myself and to the people who know me well, that, you know, every now and again, I'd like to slip into that role, to sing the torch songs, to sit at the table, the mysterious dark woman who possibly needs somebody to come and rescue her, or possibly is the dangerous woman they need to avoid. The bar behind you is where I do most of my writing on a weekly basis, and Birdie's in Wimbledon always reminded me of a New York basement bar. Now, Philip Marlowe isn't in New York. That's his counterpart by Mickey Spillane is in New York. But the Chandler anti-hero, Philip Marlowe, always reminded me of this bar, this arched brickwork, kind of jazz decor, little bit darker of an evening, and my own practices of going out by myself, of dressing up just for me, of going and sitting at a table by myself and having a cocktail or having a glass of wine, or, you know, having my notebook in front of me. When I first started going out, I wanted to be out in the world to be able to meet new people and make new acquaintances. But I also didn't want to be that kind of sad woman sitting by herself in a bar with a drink, looking lonely and pathetic. And so a lot of my writing night inspiration came from the idea that I would go out and start conversations and put stuff away if I wasn't feeling inspired, but that I would always have my notebook with me, just so that I would have something to do in case I felt like I wasn't going to be able to talk to anybody, or that I wasn't going to be able to put myself out there, that I would have something to do as a conversation piece. And I've had dozens of conversations with people wondering what I was doing with my notebook, wondering what I was doing with my writing, interested about my poetry, reading bits of my poetry. And it's a good conversation starter, as well as being something that prevents me from being that strange woman sitting on her own in a bar on a busy Thursday night. So that confluence of, is she in trouble? Does she need help? Is she flirtatious and dangerous? All of those things are what goes into the poem Noir Woman, Noir, as well as the concept of honoring those really intriguing descriptive passages in Raymond Chandler's work and Mickey Spillane's work, and that kind of thing. The Bogarts and Bacalls and the other, you know, noir heroines and heroes that bring us gangsters and justice, but not quite clean justice. The poem itself is very short, but really playful in that kind of dedication to the noir genre. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have enjoyed me revealing a little bit of my own, damsel in distress vulnerability about it. Because it's fun. It's fun to play that role. It's fun to be the femme fatale. It's fun to be the role of the damsel in distress. It's fun to be the independent woman that doesn't need a PI to help her. Someone who sits there and knows exactly what she's doing. All of those things kind of flit in and out of myself when I'm out on my writing night, but also they flit in and out of my poems. So I hope you enjoy the poem Noir. I hope you enjoy looking at Raymond Chandler's work if you're interested, but definitely, I hope you enjoy your own noir nights out on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whenever you choose to make it noir, do it and enjoy every second, every sip of that cocktail while you do. I'll see you next week for another Behind the Poem story. Good night.